Hey friends, Christy here with Little Roots Ranch, and today I wanted to talk to you about tomato pruning. And by tomato pruning, I mean tomato assault. And hear me out, because it's going to be a little rough to hear, especially if you are a brand new gardener. But in the Pacific Northwest, any flowers that do not have a tomato developed on some stage will not develop by the time we get too cold. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that you need to get rid of, but early August is best, but between early August and mid-August, you want to get rid of all of your flowers, and you also want to snip your terminal growing ends, that just means the tops, the terminal growing part. So this right here besides my hand, which is the tallest part of the plant, you see over here, this is a flower cluster, and over here on this side is a leaf, and right in the middle is the terminal bud. That will keep growing, and especially like if I was in like California or Florida or whatever, that will keep growing and growing and growing. But here we don't have the sun, and so we need to clip them, and I will show you that in a second. I want to have a few caveats or whatever. So I know that you could be anywhere in the world watching this video, so your climate might be different. In Western Washington, the majority of gardeners and mostly farmers, I think, that I know all trim their tomatoes usually around early to mid-August. And the reason that you do that is because you want your plant to focus all of its energy on developing the vine ripening, that green fruit that's on your tomato plants. And so clipping off the flowers, what that does is that saves energy, because your tomato plant is going to try to grow those out. And we know that there's no way that they will get to size and be ready. If they're cherry tomatoes, that's a little different. But for your larger tomatoes, there isn't a chance. The sun hours are getting less. After July, the temperatures start, dropping and stuff like that. And tomatoes are very sensitive, and especially we've had a rough spring. That brings me to another point. Normally we have tomatoes by now, and I do have some cherry tomatoes. I do not have any of my large slicers, and these are in the greenhouse. I do not have any of my large slicers that are ready yet, which is crazy. I usually always have, or I've always had them ready by now, but I don't. And my outside tomatoes look even worse. And so we've had this long, wet spring that was really terrible. So normally when you're doing this pruning task, you have an abundance of tomatoes. But it feels kind of odd with such delayed tomato production to be pruning them already. But nonetheless, it's still an important step. Another caveat would be if you are in a heated greenhouse, or in a greenhouse, or anything or in a microclimate that's warmer, or if you're further south or anything like that, the early to mid-August dates may not apply to you. So you need to apply it like that to your specific situation, or maybe ask like your local farm or another gardener if you're in a very different climate. But for the average Western Washington, unfortunately, it's early to mid-August. And so again, that's cutting the flower bud. And so usually you can just pinch those off. So I'll pinch this here. So you see this flower bud here? There's no developing flowers. Some of those, or tomatoes, I mean, some of the flowers aren't even open. And so even if these did produce fruit, or vegetable, whatever, they would not ripen in time. So I have to say goodbye, little buddy. But then there's also the terminal growing end. Now these are for indeterminates, because determinates are determined. And so their height is basically predetermined, and they're already well on their way. You don't have to worry about those. That's the easy part. You don't have to prune them. You don't have to worry about them. They've got their whole production unlocked. Indeterminates are the ones that require the pruning and all that stuff. But so you see here, so can you see? I think you can. There's this stem right here up the middle, and there was that flower cluster to my right, and to my left is this leaf. But right here in the middle, sticking up, you can see that behind my hand, that is a terminal end. And so that's the growing tip. And again, if I were in California, that would keep growing for feet before, the season ended. But that's what I'm gonna take off. It's small enough that I'm gonna pinch it, and voila. So as you can see, this would have been another leaf, or branch, these would have grown into like full branches, and this would keep growing. I'm sure there'd be more flowers and all of that. But this guy is taken off. And basically, again, just to recap, all the flowers that are not already growing tomatoes, just go and pinch those off. All of the tips, don't mind this is a radish that went to seed that I need to get rid of. All of the growing tips, so like back here, I don't think you can see it. You can turn it to the side. Whatever, but basically all the tips of the tomatoes, you're gonna pinch that growing end and take off the flowers. For indeterminates, I know it sounds weird, but I promise it's the best way. If you are uncomfortable or with clipping them, or you just don't want to or anything like that, obviously your garden, your rules. What you can do is at the end of the season with the green tomatoes is you can actually bring them inside and ripen them inside. They were generally, and usually I'll put them in like a paper bag or something like that. They will not be as good as vine ripened tomatoes, and they generally mold a lot quicker, and you have to use them really quick, but they're still tomatoes that you grew. And so there's no shame in that, of course, because tomatoes are tomatoes, at worst, your tomato will taste like a store tomato, which is a homegrown tomato is always better than a store tomato. So anyways, if you have any questions, drop those down below. Again, early to mid-August, pinch off your flowers that do not have tomatoes attached to them yet, and your terminal growing buds for your determinants, unless you're in a really warm area or a warm microclimate, or you've got them in like a heated greenhouse or something like that. Thank you for watching, and happy gardening. Bye.